What's up everyone? In this video I'm going to talk about the Nikon D200. In this video I'm going to go through why it might just be the best vintage camera you can get in 2025. So the Nikon D200 was released in November of 2005. This makes it a 20-year-old camera. When it was released, it was priced at $1,800. That's a little over $3,300 adjusted for inflation in 2025. For reference, when the Nikon D500 was released in 2016, it was $2,000. That's about $2,600 adjusted for inflation in 2025. It was crazy how much this camera was worth back then because it was an insane performer. But it was basically some of the goodies from a flagship camera put in the D200, and that's why it was so expensive and such an insanely great camera when it was released. And just to get to the specs of the Nikon D200, it has a 10 megapixel CCD crop sensor. The ISO ranges from 100 to 1600 with a boost up to 3200. It has 11 autofocus points, and you can switch it to 7 autofocus points if you wanted to. It can shoot up to 5 FPS. It also has a 2.5-inch LCD screen. It only has one memory card slot. It has no Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi, and no video recording. The Nikon D200 does not do any video recording. There's a lot more pros than cons, just for me personally, about the D200. And one of the things that I really do like about this camera is how well built it is. I like that Nikon made the D100, the D200, and the D300. They're pretty similar in size and how bulky they are too. And another great thing I like about this camera is the autofocus. It's actually not too bad. Another great thing too is the ISO grain. I know some people may not like it, but it definitely gives the camera or the images from this camera a really unique look to it. And we'll get onto that later in this video. Another great thing about this camera too, especially if you can find one used, is that they're pretty cheap now. I got mine for about $100 at my local camera store, and now you can find a decently used one for well under $100. I think I've seen a few that's been in pristine condition for under $150. But you know, those prices just really vary depending on the condition it's in. Just be wary that this camera is over 20 years old, so you're gonna see wear and tear. I know that it's really common for the rubbers on the Nikon D200 kind of just peel away, so just be wary about that. Another great thing I like about the D200 is that it does have the AF screw, so you can utilize the older Nikon AFD screw lenses. And it's just not from Nikon. I believe Tamron, Tokina, and Sigma has the autofocus screw, and you can use those too on the Nikon D200. And again, like I said earlier, the pros definitely outweigh the cons. But one of the cons about this is if you are trying to do video, this camera does not do video. It has no video, it has no Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi, and no live view. It does not have any video recording capabilities. And the only way you can transfer images from this camera to your phone is if you use a CF card reader, and you have to transfer it from the camera to the computer and then from the computer to your phone. I know that there are some CF cards that have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth built in. I've never tried those before, but if you have, please leave a comment below because I'd like to know what cards you're using for CF cards. And also just be aware that this is a 20-year-old camera. I am beginning to see that my LCD screen is just showing some age. It's a little faded on some colors, but I just use that for reference now. When I do view the images on my computer, it's perfectly fine, and the colors are really accurate. I don't think my LCD screen isn't so bad, but it is beginning to fade just a little bit, so it is kind of hard to see during super bright days. So let's talk about the D200's image quality. I think a lot of D200 users will praise this camera's image quality just because of the CCD crop sensor. So my personal favorite lens I like to use on the D200 is both the Tamron 17-50 2.8 and the Nikon 50 1.4D. And if you know what your settings are, you can get really sharp images with these lenses too. So let me know in the comments below if you have a D200. Let me know what lens you like to use. I did bring my D200 out with the 70-210 f4 lens, and I gotta say that combo is really good. I read a few comments about the 70-210 mm f4 lens. A lot of people were talking about how well it performs against the 80-200 2.8. And I gotta say, photographers, users of the 70-210 f4 lens is pretty good. So just take a look at the images here and check them out for yourselves. And let's talk about the ISO performance on the D200. It's actually not too bad, and earlier, as I said, that grain definitely gives you a really unique look to it. I really like the high ISO grain. It gives like a film look to it. As you can see a few samples here. You'd let me know what you think about the film grain. I think it looks a lot different from my Nikon Z6 and Z50. This D200 CCD sensor definitely gives a grain that's almost film-like. So if you're looking for a DSLR that gives you kind of like that film grain, the D200 is a nice one. And also to add, I think the D200's autofocus in low light situations is actually pretty good. It's one of the things that surprised me when I was using it in low light situations. And again, the colors from the D200 are great too, especially if you know what your settings are. It's actually pretty impressive for the age of the camera too. I personally like how accurate the colors are, but I do enhance it just a little bit. But as you can see, these pictures here, these are not edited. These are just straight from the camera JPEGs. You let me know what you think about them. As for sharpness, I still think it holds up, and for colors, it's pretty accurate. I like it. The dynamic range on the D200 is pretty good too. So if you want to recover your shadows, it's not too bad. I think the dynamic range and the image quality is far more superior than any modern cell phone, even iPhones out there too. So let's go to the D200's autofocus. Since the Nikon D200 has a more advanced settings and button layouts, here is what I would prefer. Your settings may vary depending on what kind of photography you're doing, but me personally, I like to use the single AF point selection and select the AF buttons that way. And I also set my autofocus mode to AFS for taking photos of still subjects. As you can see here, you can actually switch from manual, AFS, and AFC. It's just, you know, AFC is the C, AFS is the S, and M is manual. And I do like how easy you can switch those settings too, especially if you know what you're photographing. So overall, the autofocus performance is pretty good. I would say it's right up there actually with the D5000 series cameras. Definitely not as quick as the D300, but it's still surprisingly quick. And a little history about the D100, D200, and the D300 cameras. Those were built in the days of, you know, that professional built camera. You had to know what your settings are. You had to know what certain modes you had to choose. I really like that Nikon chose these bodies to have more of that professional feel to them. As I said earlier, the D200 had some D2X goodies. The Nikon D2X is a professional grade camera. I think back when it was released, it was a flagship camera, but the D2X had the CMOS sensor, whereas the D200 had the CCD sensor. So that's one of the bigger differences between those two cameras. But it was pretty cool to see that they did put some of the neat D2X technology in a D200. And I can see why it was such a powerful camera. And the D200 was a huge upgrade from the D100. The D100 was released back in 2002. Then in 2005, the D200 was released. I did do a review on the D100, so if you're interested in watching that video, I'll have a link in the description below if you're interested in learning more about the D100. And then 2 years later, after the release of the D200, was the D300. And I remember this was in the era of megapixels. A lot of photographers were looking at brands that had the highest megapixel because back then, you know, the higher the megapixels, the sharper your images were. I think we all understand that higher megapixels don't really matter, especially if 99% of your work is on social media now. A lot of those camera brands were releasing these really awesome, innovative cameras that were being released. These cameras were, from what I remember, it was technological advancement, especially for, you know, photo quality and how fast the cameras were processing the images and how fast the autofocus was. I think the D200 still holds up really well in 2025, especially if you know what you're doing. Do you think the Nikon D200 is going to be worth some change in the future? Let me know in the comments. Overall, the D200 is still definitely worth it in 2025, especially if you want to start your vintage DSLR collection. And I think it's a little weird just to say vintage DSLR just because there isn't really a set date on what's vintage for a DSLR. I know there's a vintage film cameras, but you let me know in the comments what you think how old a vintage DSLR should be. I believe the D200 still holds its own today because of 4 reasons. Number 1, its CCD sensor. The 10 megapixel CCD sensor still produces amazing colors, as some photographers prefer the CCD over the newer CMOS sensors, which makes the D200 great for portraits, landscapes, and studio photography, especially since you won't be using the higher ISO ranges. The second reason why I think the D200 is still really well is the pro level build quality at an amazing price, especially if you can find one that's still in good condition. Like I said earlier, these are older, so the rubbers will probably be peeling depending on the condition it's in, so just be aware of that. So if you can find one where the rubbers aren't falling apart yet and it's a good deal, I think you should pick one up. So even if it says it's weather sealed, it has been 20 years. I've taken mine out to automotive events and I haven't had any issues with it. And number three, I think it makes a great learning tool for beginners, especially if you're on a budget. The D200 does force you to learn manual settings without being really overwhelmed with more advanced autofocus settings and on-screen graphics. For example, if you look at my Z50 screen and the D200 is very straightforward, especially if you're not overwhelmed with the Z50's graphics and such. The D200 is very straightforward. Make those changes and you can go right away to taking photos. And number four, it's very affordable. Like I said earlier, you can find a bunch of these for under $100, and they're much cheaper than the vintage film cameras. The D200 may be a relic of the past, but it still holds a lot of charm. If you appreciate the CCD colors and the ISO performance, this is the camera for you. Here's just a few examples with a high ISO from the D200. And if you had a D200, let me know in the comments because I would like to hear your experiences with it. And if you're thinking about getting one, let me know in the comments and I'll try my best to help you out. And I hope this video helps you decide to keep your D200 or just use your D200, especially if you found one in a closet or you got it from a family member. Definitely keep it because this D200 still holds up really well. Also, I have done portraits with the D200 on my channel if you're interested in how well it does for portraits. So check that out as well. And I really appreciate you watching this video. If you like this video, please like and subscribe because that does help my channel grow. So if you have any questions about the D200, leave a comment below and let me know what you think about it. Again, thanks for watching everyone. See ya.